Let me ask you something directly. If you don't ask for more right now, are you protecting your position or quietly accepting a decision you'll regret later? Because staying quiet feels safe. But safe decisions are often the ones with the highest long-term cost. In this video, we're not talking about confidence. We're not talking about courage. We're talking about whether asking makes sense at all and how to decide that before you risk anything. In the last video, we talked about the invisible cost of indecision, about how not choosing is still a choice, just one you don't control. What many people underestimate is this: indecision doesn't show up as a single mistake. It shows up as a slow narrowing of options. Today, we go one level deeper. Because one of the most common high-stakes decisions professionals face is this: do I ask for more, or do I stay quiet? Not louder, not bolder, just whether to ask at all. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't stay quiet because it's rational. They stay quiet because they can't prove to themselves that asking is the right move. They don't lack confidence, they lack decision clarity. You've probably heard this before. Just ask. The worst they can say is no. If you don't ask, you don't get. That advice sounds empowering, but it ignores reality. Because in real careers, no is rarely just no. Sometimes no means you're remembered differently. You're seen as misaligned. You've shifted how risk is perceived around you. And sometimes the response isn't even a clear no. It's silence, deflection, delay, which is often worse. The real world doesn't punish asking directly. It reprices you quietly afterward. So the real question is not, can you ask? The real question is, what happens if you ask and you're wrong? Wrong timing, wrong leverage, wrong read of the environment. This is where most advice fails. It treats every situation as equal. They aren't. When you stay quiet, you're not doing nothing. You are making a trade. You're trading short-term safety for long-term positioning. And that trade can be smart or extremely expensive. Staying quiet can make sense if your leverage is unclear, timing is genuinely wrong, the downside is asymmetric. For example, if your team is restructuring, if leadership is changing, if budgets are frozen. In those moments, silence can be strategic, but it becomes dangerous when silence turns into habit. Because silence has a hidden message attached to it. I'll adapt, even if nothing changes. Over time, that message becomes your position. Not officially, not written down, but embedded in expectations. And expectations are very hard to renegotiate later. This is exactly why I built Ask for More, the salary negotiation decision framework. Not to tell you how to negotiate, but to help you decide whether negotiating makes sense at all, before you risk your position. If you want a calm, structured way to think this through, you'll find the link below. No pressure, just clarity. Most people think the risk is asking too early. In reality, the bigger risk is asking too late. Because once you've stayed quiet long enough, expectations solidify, your silence becomes the baseline. Asking later feels disruptive instead of reasonable. Imagine this scenario. You've been delivering consistently for years. You never asked, you adapted. You absorbed more responsibility. At some point, management doesn't see this as growth. They see it as normal. When you finally ask, it doesn't feel like alignment. It feels like a break in pattern, and pattern breaks create friction. At that point, even a rational request feels emotional, and because it's overdue. And overdue decisions always feel heavier than they should. Here's a simple test you can run mentally. Not to decide what to say, just to decide whether asking is rational. Ask yourself, if nothing changes in the next 12 months, am I okay with that outcome? Not theoretically, not optimistically, realistically. If the answer is yes, staying quiet may be a rational choice. If the answer is no, then silence is already a decision against yourself. And here's the key insight. Delayed decisions reduce optionality. The longer you wait, the fewer clean exits you have. The fewer clean conversations are possible. Here's something rarely discussed. Asking is not just a request, it's a signal. It signals how you see your role, how you interpret your value, how you read the system. Most people assume that a request is evaluated purely on numbers. It isn't. It's evaluated in context. When you ask, you're not only asking for more, you're implicitly communicating how you understand. your position inside the organization, your replaceability, the current power balance, and that signal is read long before any answer is given. This is why two people can ask for the same thing and receive completely different reactions. Not because one asked better, but because the signal behind the request was different. One signal says, "I understand how this system works, and this request fits within it." The other signal says, "I feel pressure, uncertainty, or frustration, and I need relief." Even if the words are identical, that's why asking without clarity feels dangerous. Not because asking is wrong, but because unclear signals create risk. Here's a practical example. Imagine two professionals asking for a salary adjustment. The first one asks after clearly expanded responsibility, visible ownership, alignment with business outcomes. The signal is stable. The second one asks after long silence, quiet frustration, emotional buildup. Even if the request is reasonable, the signal feels reactive, and reactive signals change how future decisions are made. Not immediately, but gradually. That's how people become difficult, misaligned, or high maintenance, not through one conversation, but through unread signals over time. This is why asking blindly is dangerous, and why deciding whether to ask is more important than asking itself. Because once the signal is sent, you don't get to fully control how it's interpreted. This is also why confidence-based advice fails. Confidence doesn't correct a misread signal, it amplifies it. What you need before asking is not courage, it's signal alignment. You need to know what this request communicates, how it fits into the broader pattern, and whether it strengthens or weakens your position. This is where frameworks matter. Not because they give you scripts, but because they slow you down enough to see the system you're operating in. And once you see the system clearly, the decision often becomes obvious. Inside Ask for More, I walk you through a calm decision process. When asking makes sense, when staying quiet is smarter, how to assess real leverage, how to decide without emotion, scripts, or bravado. It's not about confidence, it's about positioning. If you're facing this decision right now, the link is below. In the first video, we talked about how indecision compounds quietly. This is one of those moments. Not asking is often framed as patience. But patience without a plan is just deferred discomfort. If you missed that video, it's linked here. It gives important context. Because salary decisions rarely stand alone. They are usually symptoms of a larger decision system. Sometimes the question isn't, should I ask for more? It's, why am I still in a position where asking feels this risky? That's a different decision entirely, because when asking consistently feels dangerous, it's often not a communication problem, it's a structural one. Sometimes the environment is wrong, sometimes growth is capped structurally. Sometimes silence is rewarded, until it isn't. In those environments, negotiation doesn't solve the core issue. It only delays confronting it. You can negotiate inside a system for a while, but you can't negotiate what the system fundamentally allows. At some point, the cost of staying quiet isn't just financial, it becomes psychological. You start calibrating yourself downward. You stop forming clear expectations. You adjust to ambiguity instead of resolving it. And that's usually the moment when people confuse endurance with strategy. That's where quit and go comes in. Not as an exit plan, but as a reality check. Not every problem should be negotiated. Some need to be reevaluated at the system level. Sometimes the most rational move isn't to ask for more, but to decide whether staying is still a rational use of your time, energy, and optionality. And that decision deserves the same level of calm structure as any negotiation ever could. If you're unsure whether asking makes sense, ask for more gives you clarity. If you're unsure whether staying makes sense, quit and go helps you assess that calmly without pressure. Both links are below. No hype, no pushing, just better decisions. In the next video, we'll talk about something closely related. What happens when staying just a bit longer becomes the most expensive decision of all? Not dramatically, not emotionally, but structurally. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you there.